Our options are die or try. And that's what I chose to do.
We're back for episode 2 of Just Another Space Podcast. And I got to say, I've been so thrilled to see the positive response we've gotten in the first episode with Andy Bunker. I mean, so many friends, colleagues, new friends that we've made, folks who have found us and reached out. It's just been really cool. I don't know about you.
No, same. I'm glad my cousins and aunts and uncles are pushing up our download count.
Yeah, so continue to like and subscribe. We love the feedback. We're grateful. We got another great episode here. Before we get into it, though, last on the first podcast, and we were talking with Andy about, is this the right name? Is this a working title? So I want to share a couple names that some of our listeners have suggested just to run them by you, Clayton, to get your feedback on them.
Yeah,
I think we're going to stick with Just Another Space Podcast, but I want to give some shout outs. So Scott Bromson from NASA OLA suggested not Just Another Space Podcast. I thought that was interesting.
But it's not just another space podcast.
It's just another space podcast.
It's just another space podcast.
Yeah. Fair enough. We haven't earned the not yet. Another one, Julian Sullivan suggested not enough space. I like that. That's interesting. And then one that just came in from Joel Graham here was statecraft and spacecraft, which is blank. That fits our...
Catchy. Yeah, those are okay.
The other one is launching and legislating.
Did you just get that one live?
Well, that was from him too. So he gave us 2 recs. These are great. I honestly think we're just going to keep collecting better titles until we settle on here. So
we could always have a number of titles, like a Habsburg emperor. We've got 27 titles.
We're going to be the Habsburg royalty of podcasts. I like that aspirational goal. Well, speaking of royalty, I think we have a real gem of an episode today with our guest. Do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, we've got Matt Gialich. He's the CEO and founder of AstroForge. It's an asteroid mining company, second generation asteroid mining company. I think Tom and I could both characterize it that way. There's some strong language in this podcast. I think you will find it informative and also entertaining. I'm not particularly worried about my toddlers listening in, but just flagging that if there are any small children listening to us, the parents out there, you may have to cover their ears at some point.
Yeah, our guest is colorful and a blast to talk to, but earmuffs on the kids for this one. But
if there are kids listening, that is freaking awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to discourage that, Tom.
I like to think we're tapping into...
Maybe they'll learn a new word.
Yeah, that's for sure. I can think of a couple that they'll learn. But no, great episode. And for 2 skeptics like us, right, on some of the commercial space stuff, honestly, by the end of the episode, I'm pretty convinced. So enjoy, and we're off on Just Another Space
episode
Podcast.
2. Yep.
Here we go. Hello, and welcome to our second episode of Just Another Space Podcast. I'm Tom Culligan, here with my co-host Clayton Swope, and we are very excited to have Matt Gialich. Did I say that right, Matt?
Got it right.
All right. Good. Right out of the gate, we're off to a good start. Who is the CEO and co-founder of AstroForge. Really exciting company doing some really cool work on deep space mining that we're going to get into today. So we're thrilled you're here. Clayton, any opening remarks before we jump in?
No, just pointing out to our listeners that Tom has put on a shirt and tie for us right now, just to make sure that we're all appropriately businesslike for this.
It's about respect for our guests. That's what I'm trying to project here. So
I'm in a sweatshirt, so I guess it shows you how well it's. I guess maybe if I zip it up a little more, it looks more professional. There we go.
Just means I'm the man. I've just spent too much time in DC. So, well, Matt, one of the things we do on the show is look at the intersection of politics, policy, funding in the space sector. And so really interested in hearing about the business, where you guys are going, but also looking at, we know you got the first ever deep space commercial spectrum license from the FCC, talking about some of that and some of these other really interesting questions that your business model opens up from a policy perspective. I think right off the bat, how did you get here?
You used to work at a scooter company, so tie that together for us too.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, look, like most kids growing up in LA, and I was very close to a place called the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and we went on field trips there, and, people would come give us talks, and I've always loved deep space. I've always thought that is awesome. I've always loved those pictures from Voyager and the Cassini missions, and these missions that really shaped our understanding of the cosmos and why the fuck we're here. And then you get older and you go to college and you're like, oh, cool. I'm not a scientist. What job is there for me doing this? And so One of the jobs I quickly found myself at was a place called Virgin Orbit. It was a rocket company, right? Building rockets. They eventually went bankrupt. So I can give you all the reasons why not. It's not important. What was important, though, is it really shaped my understanding of how you build space hardware, but not how you could, how you did. And it was very much like, here's the document on how you build a rocket. Let's go follow it. Here's all the tests we do. Let's go follow it. We'll call ourselves commercial space. We'll take some risk in some areas, but at the end of the day, it was a standard rocket program. So after about 5 years at Virgin Orbit, I said, like, cool, I'm not learning anything anymore. Where can I go that I could learn? And I actually Googled, what is the fastest growing company? And the first one that popped up was a company called Bird Rides. At that time, it had just raised a big round. It was actually the fastest growing company in history to a unicorn valuation. I said, fuck yeah, I'm going to go join this place because I want to see how the other side works. When you don't have government and you don't have this huge amount of capex that really lowers your risk profile, what can you do? And so after a lot of shit talking by my friends and family being like, hold on, you're a rocket scientist and you're going to go build scooters, I joined a scooter company. And I walk in there day one and they say, cool, we have 8 months to build 100,000 scooters. I'm like, okay, how do we do it? And they're like, well, we don't know. We actually have like this little drawing of a shitty scooter, but like we all get the sense of a scooter, like it's 2 wheels and a panel. What can you do? What's really interesting is that was the first time where we were allowed to use, I think, what has now become a bad word. It's called China. And we used them a lot to build a lot of the components and to do the manufacturing and worked with them very closely. And what we saw was like, holy shit, if you don't live in fear and you don't live after this whole government segment of like, you can't touch anything, every other country is bad, you can go extremely fast and take a lot different risks. Now, to be clear, there was definitely some stuff that was like shady as hell. I mean, it was not always straight lace, right, as you went into it, but it showed me a different side of the coin. And it showed me that at volume, we could produce very, very quickly at very high risk. My risk profile was off. Where I thought the inflection point was on risk, what was wrong? And so when it came time to eventually start AstroForge, I thought about the situation the same side, which is like, is our risk profile in space wrong? You know, NASA just launched a mission not too long ago called Europa Clipper. Cost us $5.5 billion or whatever it is as you go out there. And that risk profile is essentially zero. Very few people doubted that Europa Clipper is going to work or that it's going to get out there or that NASA's done the right thing. Maybe they fucked it up, but like still, these are pretty high certainty to be successful missions. That's not AstroForge. We are definitely trying to figure out where that kink in the graph is. How far can we push that risk profile to have a successful mission? We're about 2 weeks away from launching a mission called Odin. This is going to go out to an asteroid. Like, this is what you guys talked about, the license. This will be the first privately funded deep space mission in history. Cost me $6.5 million. That 4 orders of magnitude less. That's a different price point. That changes what we're talking about when we talk about space exploration, we talk about the future. Now, I'm also guessing that where I drew that kink in the risk graph was correct. This thing may not fucking work at all. We may look like total idiots and it may never turn on and we're like, well, we fucking suck. But at the end of the day, I want to go try something different. I want to push us as a species a little bit more forward. And you don't do that by not having big balls.
And you kind of already had that happen where you had to pivot to something new when you had someone that was supposed to deliver your satellite bus. That didn't work out like you thought. Not to kind of jump into the weeds here, but kind of tell us about that and how you bounced back from what is quite a big setback.
Look, when you run a company and where the answer is always death or success, like you have to always aim for success. And, you know, what ended up being about March 13th, we got a delivery from a company. Our original thesis of the company, by the way, was to buy satellite buses. There's all these companies out there that are buying satellite buses in the world and are building satellite buses. Like, cool, this is clearly a race to the bottom. You have a lot of players, a lot of competition. We can get this super cheap. And we did get it super cheap. What we got was a total piece of shit, and that's putting it nicely. And so I realized when I saw that vehicle that, like, this isn't going to work. This was a mistake. And there's 2 ways to think about that. You know, number one is, do we go back to the vendor? Do we have negotiations? Do we figure out how to make it? Or do I just rip the fucking Band-Aid off, call an all-hands meeting at the team and say, hey, this company fucked us. Like, our options are die or try. And that's what I chose to do. And we chose try. And we chose try on April 1st of 2024.
How big of a setback, time-wise?
I mean, it was starting from scratch, to be clear. There was the only thing that we kept was the propulsion system, the thrusters and the tanks, which actually had to go be fixed because they were damaged in transit. Other than that, it was a complete redo of the entire fucking spacecraft. So not only did we build the first deep spacecraft, we actually build it and we'll launch it in what will be less than 10 months. That's completely stupid. And, you know, that's what startups are about. Massive amounts of risks and seeing if you can pull it off.
So that's your kind of your takeaway from being at Bird. And I think Tom and I both know that's generally not how space works. That same mindset, that you can do something at scale and do it so quickly and do it with that risk profile. Do you see other companies behaving that way, or do you still feel like that is very foreign to how the space ecosystem work, even from the startup side?
Extremely foreign. We still like to pretend that like, oh, there's this whole startup culture of the space industry. There's not. There's a whole bunch of companies that are building really, really secure, great products in the space world. To me, they're not startups. They're extensions of what Boeing was, probably with a little bit less bureaucracy. And that's not a negative thing. These companies require a lot of capital. And so if you're going to invest a lot of capital, you want your risk to be lower. I mean, this is just like basic financial markets, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't actually change for startups. If it's going to cost you $10 billion to hit to be profitable, you're not going to want to take a whole bunch of risk. So number one, the companies that can take risk have to have much lower capital calls, right? Much lower cost of capital. Number two is there's just not a lot of people willing to fail that have actually done this, right? That have gone through at that level and are actually taking the risk. A lot of people are terrified. This is not the type of business where you have a lot of college dropouts starting space companies. Most of us have advanced degrees. We've been in the industry for 10 plus years. And to do this to an extent, you essentially got to take all that information, all that background. You know, you can go get a great secure job, make a shitload of money. You got to roll the dice and say, fuck it, I'm going to go the other direction and take more risk and see if I can do something different.
And what you're trying to do, I mean, Tom, I'll let you go into this because I think you were in the weeds on this more than I was in the trenches. But, you know, you're not the first to think, let's mine an asteroid. But you're approaching it in a very different way. And I think we talked about this, Tom, many, many times, not necessarily on our show, but a lot of space, you know, there is no space economy really outside of the government as a customer for everything really but satellite communications right now. And maybe what you're trying to do, which is not tied at all to something that the U.S. government or somebody else would buy. It's tied to a commercial reason to do something in space, bring it back to Earth. So like that tie to that commercial business case, an enterprise customer, consumer, is really not there for most of space services. And Tom, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. I mean, seeing this happen.
I was just saying, you actually have a domestic or terrestrial, in this case, like commodities market that is established. You've got all these market signals. You know what the customer base is. You know what the market rate is. So you have something to work against. I think when you look at like space tourism or a lot of these in situ resources from, we're going to turn, water ice on the moon into rocket fuel. It's much more of there's no real market today for that. And so, but what's interesting, and maybe, jumping off that for the question would be, Clayton and I were staffers on the Hill when you had planetary resources and deep space industries. And that first wave of like the space mining companies come up, and we heard all the things. But what's interesting is you are already further ahead, I think, than they ever got in terms of with your first mission and with what's going on your second mission. They never seem to even, is that because the technology and the price points changed, so it changes your business case? Or is it just you have a different leadership in business model in terms of how you look at risk and your investor situation than maybe they had 10, 15 years ago?
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things here. Those two companies, both in different ways, though, paved the road for us to even exist. Like, I don't want to undermine them and say they're idiots and they went bankrupt because of XYZ. Like, both of those founders, DSI and Planetary Resources, have been super helpful to us. Those guys are all awesome. And in fact, some of the techniques we use actually come straight out of those companies from talking to those founders, right? Like, this is an extension of what they built. The time frame we're going after is very fucking different. In 2008, 9, 10, when these companies were really at the point we are now, right, in their lifespan, how the fuck would you get to deep space? You had an option. It was called the Delta IV. Delta IV cost $450 million.
Right.
Like, if I had a Delta IV option to go to deep space, guess where I would not be going? Deep space. Like, I don't have $450 million, right? Like, that's just not a reality. It is a different time in history, and it's not even because of Falcon. It's actually because of the CLIPS program. NASA's program to go to the moon has provided funding to buy dedicated launches to the moon. And there's a lot of extra space on those rockets, and nobody really wants to go to the moon except for the landers. And we can agree with you. Look, I'm going to be the one that agrees with you all day long on a business model here. I talked to a lot of founders about this. If your business didn't exist last year at some rate, like, I'm not interested in what it is this year. If the answer is 0 for the market, then the answer next year is still going to be 0. Like, don't build a business into a market that has 0 in size. And water ice on the moon, or saying like, if we have water on the moon, that's all great. Who the fuck's going to buy water on the moon? Maybe NASA will write you some small check or pretend like they're going to buy it at quantity, but like that's a one-time bullshit purchase. I just personally, two things here. I don't fucking get it. Like, there's a whole bunch of companies that want to go after the moon. What they really want to go after is government contracts, and that's called a defense play, and that's all great. I don't have a huge interest here. Like, no offense, the government, Jesus Christ, is the most boring place in the world to go try to build a company out of. Like, you got to push really fast and push really hard. The last thing I want to do is be held up by this laundry list of FAR requirements on how to run a contract, right? It's just not indicative of going fast and changing the world. And then number two is like, what's the commercial play? There isn't one. Like, the next time I hear a dual use company that makes fucking missiles, like, that's not dual use. I can't commercially go buy a missile. What are we talking about here? Like, we just try to conflate this to get a better sense of government contracts. I truly think there is two commercial use cases for space. One of them is communications, and you're seeing this a little bit with Starlink. That's exactly what it is. The second one is resources for Earth. I hope in the future we have fucking space colonies and we're conquering the universe and all this bullshit. That's all great. The answer today is that we're not. And like, it doesn't matter what I have in space. It's worth nothing in space. I have to bring it back. And so I'm going to build a company based off a current market, not off a future market that I want to see exist.
And was that one of your drivers when you came up with this idea for Astro?
100%. My driver for the idea is exactly what I told you guys. If the market
Get away from
didn't
government
exist last year, I'm not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so I
But
had
get
all
away
these
from the
stupid
government.
ideas.
That was your thought too. I don't
The
want the
government is
government.
not a customer.
But was that
That's
one
how
of
I
your
look.
drivers that you said, I
Yes.
don't want to have my main customer be the government?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have an interest in making Virgin Orbit 2.0.
Yeah, and that's the big difference, quite frankly, from and not knocking Planet. We have friends who were at those companies too, but very quickly they, there's sort of a joke among the staffers on the Hill is, company comes in, we're going to be pure play commercial. We just need a good regulatory environment, and then very quickly it's like, well, we just need to be the government, one of many buyers, and then it's, well, the government needs to be the majority buyer to stimulate the market, but then we're going to sell a lot, and before you know it, they're pitching a defense contract, and to your point, they're now trying to be just a new entrant in the defense market. And so it sounds like really kind of you've already moved out beyond when we saw them make that pivot. It's before they ever launched anything. You guys have launched and are launching, and you're not making that pivot, which shows you maybe there is a pathway here that you're pioneering that we didn't see, 15 years ago.
It's the eye on your prize. Like, that's not your prize. Your prize is totally independent of completely independent of the government. It's not even like, well, we could do business with the government later. It's just so far away from something that the government would be buying. It feels very different than even, I think, Tom, to your point, remote sensing, something like a company that's taking pictures of the Earth, for those that are listening to this podcast that actually don't know what that is, but just remote sensing where a company's imaging something. And, I can think in my head, I guess I could think of a commercial enterprise customer who may want to use that or do some sense making and derive some information that an insurance company might want. But I know right now who's buying that, and that's the government. What you're trying to do, when I think of platinum group metals, I don't know if we've even said that yet. So materials that have, they're very valuable on Earth. I don't think, the government's going to be buying that. I don't think that's something that the DoD is going to be buying or NASA is going to be buying.
No, I mean, that's the whole point here. I like to say, when I talk to people about this, what I say is like, I know a truly dual use company, and it's called Apple. And that's because the government buys laptops and humans buy laptops. And like, other than that, there's a lot of bullshit around this, but there's not a lot of dual use companies. And so like, let's stop pretending about this, in my opinion, and just go do something that is commercial focused. And if the government wants to buy platinum group metals from, great. But I already have a market if they don't. If the government says, we don't give a fuck about your business, cool. Then I already have a whole bunch of contracts to go sell this on the commodities market. It's a very different business model.
Why do you think so many companies then, they're able to get investors who make that argument that, hey, we're dual use, I should say space companies, space startups, we're going to sell this and Bank of America is going to want to buy it, or some other commercial enterprise customer is going to buy it. And then it feels like everyone's just drank that Kool-Aid that is something that the cislunar economy, the so-called cislunar economy, the implication that there is this very diverse set of customers for different things that are happening on the moon and in cislunar space. I feel like, and this is just speaking for me, VCs and investors say, yeah, I want to fund that. I don't think anyone's saying, well, actually, our main customer is the government. That's all we're doing. You know, we're selling to the government and we're crossing our fingers. Like, I don't hear that pitch, but not maybe the community I'm in. Am I wrong? Or are people being straightforward? Like, nope, government play only, and VCs are like, we want that.
I think whenever you have capital allocators, venture capitalists, private equity, whatever you want to look at, they are looking at some point, especially as the checks get bigger, to have downside protection. I hear this all the time from larger firms where they say, like, we're okay to have a 2 or 3x markup and not have a chance to go to zero, than have a 1,000x markup and a chance to go to zero. Like, so it's the same thing that you have in wealth management. When you have, like, old families that have been around forever and you go talk to their investment officer, they're almost trying to preserve wealth, grow it. And I think VC is a lot of the same way. The incentive structure for VC that nobody wants to admit is that the incentive structure for VC is to disperse your fund and go raise your next fund and make management fees. And, one day that'll probably change, especially as we go through some of this new capital constriction that we're seeing. But for right now, that's what it is. And so what a better way than if the government gives me a $100 million contract to go to the moon, I can underwrite to that contract, put a $50 million check in, and, like, my downside is this company gets $100 million. Gives you a lot more time.
You're buying a treasury note, effectively.
Essentially, right? It's all about that risk return profile that investors are looking at. And so it does take a special type of investor to say, fuck it, I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket and see if these crazy dudes can pull it off. Because I think everybody understands, like, the outcome of AstroForge is massive. We essentially are the sole provider of resources for the planet. That's a very different business model than I'm going to get a $150 million NASA contract.
Right. Are you dependent, though, to a certain degree on NASA? Then you mentioned CLIPS. So if CLIPS didn't exist, does your business make sense?
Yes. We already have sole dedicated launch contracts. I mean, one of them we announced was Stoke Space as we go into the future. But yeah, the business model closes without CLIPS. CLIPS is a great way to send up our first couple demo missions and go attempt this. We would not be able to buy an entire rocket, at the funding levels we have right now for these first missions. Like, it gave me a very cheap launch to go attempt this shit.
Prove it, and then you're going to scale it.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of NanoRacks. If you followed them, it was like, look, they were getting free rides on commercial cargo, Antares, Cygnus, and Falcon Dragon. But then, it was a pure play commercial transaction that was happening for the experiment. You guys are kind of leveraging the same thing. But I'm guessing here, look, once you validate, because of the value of the platinum group metals and what you can do, really contracting for rides at that point, that's not going to be a barrier for you.
No, especially with all the new launch vehicles coming online. I mean, we have New Glenn, we have Stoke, we have Firefly, we have SpaceX, we have, so many different players going after. It's an awesome time to be in space. I mean, it clearly is going to be, I think, really, really lead to actually cheaper launch. You hear this all the time, like, oh, launch prices are going down. And what I will tell people is, like, well, have you actually got, they're not. Like, you can go look at SpaceX's website, they've actually gone up. I think the margin to launch is going down, but right now it's all being allocated to SpaceX. And I think that margin is going to start to spread out across multiple different providers as we go forward.
That's interesting.
And Tom, I don't want to steal your question because we talked about this a while ago, but if you are bringing these high value platinum group metals down to earth, does that manipulate's the wrong word. Does that affect the value? Like, the word that comes to my head is, like, are you flooding the market now with these materials, and therefore, because of your success, they're not as valuable?
So there's two outcomes here that I'll talk about for a second. First is, like, when you look at a commodity, you have this term called elasticity, right? And it says how much of that commodity can you put into the market before you really fuck up the price. That's my explanation of it. And platinum group metals total transaction value just measured through London last year was about $60 billion. If you look at over-the-counter included, you're somewhere in the range of $200 to $300 billion a year. Elasticity on commodities, I'm just going to make an assumptions around 10%. That's what it is for most of them. So let's say it's 10%. That means I could bring back $20 to $30 billion per year before I fuck the price up. Which, at the point of bringing back $20 to $30 billion a year, cool. Like, there's a different problem that I'll hire some person out of Harvard to go give a shit about. Like, I don't care.
Right. Where do we get them now? Is it from China? Just out of curiosity.
Most of it is from South Africa, China, and Russia. In fact, less than 2% of platinum group metal ore exists in the United States. Most of this shit is at this point so deep underground. You're going to hear about this all the time. It always cracks me up. It'd be like someone says, like, oh, I found a new deposit of platinum group metals. It's at 14,000 miles below the surface of the earth. And I'm like, okay, cool. The core of the earth also has a lot of platinum group metals in it too, bro. Good job. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like,
right. So really, you can make an argument for this is helping the U.S. maybe sever dependence on somebody else, maybe people that we don't like very much.
This is the only way to actually secure critical resources for the United States. There is no other way to do it. Now, you can do some kind of stockpile or some hoarding, but like that makes a complete supply and demand curve of what you're looking at there. At the end of the day, there is no other way to do this. Like, this shit does not exist within the boundaries of our country, right? So it's not another option. Look, resources from space has to happen. The bet that people are making on AstroForge is that the timing is right for us to take it on. And we may be fucking wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys there's a 100% chance this business works out. I don't fucking know, but I'm willing to try. That's the difference.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting, just for like your average viewer who may not be a mining or space expert, that it's easier potentially to go to an asteroid in deep space and extract the metals than it is to get them out of the Earth, which is kind of wild when you think about the cost and the complexity dynamic there. That suddenly, I think if your business case closes and you all do this, it proves that that doing this in space is easier than really deep mining on Earth, which is kind of a fascinating change in the market.
I don't know if it's I don't know if easier is the right word. I'll use a different word, which is it's cheaper. And at the end of the day, this is an economic use case. And like what commodities come down to is margin on economics. You know, the margin on platinum group metals right now is extremely thin. It fluctuates kind of between 5 to 15%. In some cases, actually turning negative. You saw this at what's called Sabine-Stillwater in Montana. They shut down the mine because it had negative margin. You know, on our current business plan right now, which by the way, we're hitting all the milestones for, and like we're getting pretty close. I mean, we're launching some shit to an asteroid. We will be at about the 86% gross margin range on mining platinum. Like this is a revolutionary change in how we look at these resources going forward.
How do like your traditional, your legacy terrestrial mining companies view this? Are you a fly? Are you a gnat? They're like, whatever Matt's doing, I don't care.
I think like, it's a little bit twofold. I think, look, the honest truth is you hear asteroid mining and you look at this and you're like, okay, cool. There's some dudes that's like smoking crack in the back room. Like, great. Let me see it.
Used to make scooters.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, whatever. Fuck these guys.
Yeah,
I think as we get closer to this and it becomes more real, you start to get more outreach, both from the media side, from this. People are like, oh shit, these guys are like actually doing something. Like,
talk to us.
It's not, you know, I have this thing in space that if you tell me your launch is 3 years away, it's actually infinity years away. Like, I don't care.
Right.
We're 2 weeks away.
Right.
It's a real thing, right? Like it's a very different thing. And to be clear, it may go we may look like fucking morons. But I think the important thing here is that we're willing to try. And if we make this happen, no matter what, we're going to learn a lot. And hopefully we're going to make a couple names in the history book at the same time as we go show the world, like, this is a real thing we can go do. And I think once you start to turn the science fiction into reality, people are going to look at this a lot differently.
Okay, so this is Odin.
This is to kind of describe the development cost up front for the Odin mission. It's sub 10 million. You could take a bunch of shots on goal, right? Within the investment you have. You don't have to, it affords you the ability to take risk on your first couple ones, right? That if you were, to your point about Clipper or some of these other ones, like, let's say this one doesn't work, right? You could fairly quickly field a follow-on capability that addresses the...
Not really. We do have one fundamental limit here, which is we're rideshare on rockets, which means I don't control where the rocket fucking takes off. And this is probably one of the biggest crux of the business right now is like being rideshare kind of sucks because we're a passenger on a bus and like sometimes that bus is late. We've seen this over and over again. So yeah, we have mission 3. We have full funding to build mission 3, barring it leaves the Earth when we think it's going to leave the Earth. If it leaves the Earth 2 years later, like we'd run out of money. There's still a cost and overhead of engineering, especially the staff we have, right? Having an extremely highly technical staff isn't free. And so you got to balance all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we got to go fast. We got to take shots on goal. And we have an opportunity. We got to put some risk in it and fucking send it.
Okay, so Odin. The first one was Broker. Am I saying it right? Broker. Okay. Odin. Vestry.
Yeah, Vestry is the next one.
Okay, I looked it up. They're Norse gods, right? Is that right? Or okay?
Yes.
What's why? Are you a fan of Norse mythology?
I have no fucking idea why.
Okay.
That's the honest truth. Like, I just pick some names. Like, it's the same with like the name of the company or the color of the company. These things to me are great and they need to tell the story. And I have some philosophy here that I want to be different. Like, the colors of our company are kind of this orange and blue. And that's intentional. Because I go look at Boeing and it's blue and white. I go look at Raytheon and it's red and white. I go look at fucking Intuitive Machines, they're blue and white. Like, can we stop being so fucking
orange
boring?
In there. Yeah,
like,
orange.
Pops of color. Like, let's look at something a little bit different, right? Like, fuck.
I mean, I like Broker. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, that looks like an acronym. So I'm like, no, let me Google it. In Norse mythology, Broker, I love this. The one who works with metal fragments, blacksmith.
Broker's the little dude that mines.
Is
like,
a dwarf.
He's the little guy
He's a dwarf.
That makes armor.
Yeah,
a little dwarf mining guy.
What's Vestry?
Cool,
What I didn't get that one really though. What I looked it up. I'm like, okay, it's just like a brother or sister of a bunch of other dwarfs, and then it's like made from a skull.
Kind of ran out of names.
Yeah.
We picked Vestry because like it's pointing to the north and it's like the fucking or the east, and that's like where you explore and all this. I don't know. We might change the names.
Okay. No, I like that.
I mean, maybe we should name it after drugs or something. I don't know. We got to be like creative with this, right?
It looks like he's got, or she, at least 3 other dwarf siblings. So, but the other ones have a letter in it.
You got some runway there.
But the letter's not like an English alphabet letter, so I have no idea how to say them.
The Viking people did a lot of drugs because that whole Rainbow Road, like fucking, all this shit, like there's a lot going on there. So we pretty much have this whole plethora of names to go from.
Okay. So it's not a spinoff from the Thor Marvel universe, not inspired by that.
No, it's no. Not. I kind of hate superheroes. I'm gonna be this guy who's probably like go against everybody. Like superheroes, kind of like they just don't do it for me.
We're over superhero movies, I think, at this point, right?
Like the fact that Batman can't kill anybody is so fucking lame. Like, dude, kill somebody. Like, you know how many people because you don't kill, like you fucked up because you didn't just shoot the Joker like 80 times. Like, what's going on here? It has never resonated with me.
That's a Spider-Man.
Really does he kill anyone?
No, he doesn't kill. None of them kill.
Spider-Man doesn't kill either. Oh god, these guys are all
yeah.
so lame. Like, dude, what the fuck? And also, like, what is that? What's up with that outfit? Like, if it wasn't a character, and I just saw some dude on the street like in tights that make him look like a spider, I'd be like, wow, cool. That's called methamphetamines.
But wouldn't you react that way to Batman too? I mean, I think you'd react to that to any superhero costume. I can't think of one that you would see down
with
the
the
street.
cape. Like if you saw someone
normal.
walking around with a cape downtown, you'd be like, "We need to call social services. We got a problem."
Yeah, right.
Here.
Like, so superheroes have never kind of done it for me.
Okay, well, Norse gods, that works. I mean, Odin isn't that like Thor? Super, that's Thor's dad, though. I mean, but whatever. Okay, how did you find this asteroid? By the way, I just read somewhere you announced your asteroid, 2022 OB5. Sounds like a drill. How did you find it? How do you know it's a good one? That was my big question. How do you know it's got the metals?
So, in short, we don't. Here's what goes into it, though. We have a big stack ranking in the Office of Probabilities of Success versus probability of them being highly lucrative asteroids versus their size. And so you kind of weigh all these, and we had to determine, looking at a whole bunch of different criteria of which one we could go to. And the things we liked about this one are we do have spectral data on it. We actually put it on Twitter today, or X, or whatever the fuck it's called this week, showing a spectral plot of it, saying that, and it's kind of funny, you get these spectral data points, and like they fit in a band that say this could be M-type. It doesn't mean it is M-type. It just means like there's still a chance. It wasn't way out of band. We don't think it's like a ball of dirt, but it's definitely got a shot to be M-type. It seems to be a little bit smaller than we'd like. Now, we have some updated data to say it's a little bit bigger than what's predicted, but it's still kind of on the small side. So we're going to find that out as we go by. And then the third thing here is it's actually really close to Earth when we do the flyby. So we can actually send those 20 megapixel images back to Earth at a higher data rate that gives us a better chance to close them. So it's kind of like weighing out all these risks as we go through to pick this asteroid as we went out to.
Not just one thing.
So you got cameras on board. Do you have any other sensors to help you?
No, we got cameras, and what we will have is at the flyby distance we're doing, we'll have an orbital deflection due to density of the object, and hopefully that density is a real key marker of what type of asteroid these are. So we will get a density measurement. We should get a density estimate based off of our position.
And so this was good. This is where Vestry goes. Vestry's going to this one if it meets.
If it's legit, we'll go to Vestry. We have one that we actually like a little bit more for Vestry. So we'll see it. This one's not good. Like we have a great backup in the pipeline that I probably will never mention the name from. Just like I said, I would never mention this name. But this one, we have a lot more evidence to suggest it's really, really great asteroid.
Okay, so there's a Chinese company going after a similar thing, right?
Yes.
Origin Space, same thing. Platinum metals. Platinum group metals, same.
Yeah, they stole that shit from my pitch deck. Like that line they have on their website, at least from last year, was from my pitch deck.
Wait, a Chinese company stole some intellectual property?
To be clear, I say this all the time at the office. Like, I steal a lot too. And what we steal is like design. So like I told, our control room, we made it, I told the team, like, who does a great job at design for people to sit in? The Apple. So like, why don't you just go look at the Apple store and make our control in the Apple store? And so, like, it's the same finishes. We do this all the time. So I don't want to blame the Chinese for stealing, but they definitely stole that shit from me.
How real is that company? Do you think it's legit or have no way to know?
I went over there and visited them and sold them all our secrets. No, I have no fucking idea. I've never been to China. I have no idea what they are, if they're legit or not. They seem to have, there's some like news that comes out about them, but it's really hard to understand what's coming out of China as it's real or not. And that's a big challenge here as we go forward, right? Like, I just don't know.
What if they go after 2022 OB5?
Good thing I told everybody a fake asteroid.
They'll never find it.
That, you know what? If you put out a fake asteroid as a deflection, I want to take my hat off to you, because that is a brilliant business move.
You'll never
and then
know.
You're gonna come back on the show after you find out, and we want to be the reveal if that was the plan.
Have you thought about giving Odin, like, would any good droid that appears to be harmless on Star Wars has like a little electricity or a little laser that can just like reach out and boop, push the Origin space vehicle away and say, bye, this is ours.
I think what's really cool about this is when you think about space orbits, like the change in velocity between two different objects is usually extremely high. And so, like, fuck a laser, we just crash into it and we'll explode in big balls of debris. Like, so that's probably what we'll do, just straight impactors.
Okay. Yeah. Scorched earth, why not? At that point, hopefully Odin would have accomplished the mission and sent the photos back. So, done.
All right, so going back a second. So, identifying the asteroid, I'm assuming you use NASA or international funded. I mean, how do you do that? Where's the data pull from? Is it proprietary? Is it public stuff? And that you're just kind of developing your assessment based on
data comes from us calling observatories and asking them to take pictures of asteroids. That's really it. And like the greatest thing about the science community as a whole is they're extremely supportive of this mission. Now, they'll have a whole bunch of problems and everybody will say like, well, what about this? We don't think this. And that's all great. And I think what the science community hopefully sees is this intersect between the possibilities and the realities and us taking a stab at it and seeing what we find out. Every time we've been to an asteroid, we found out so much more. And this is a chance for scientists to actually get some data back on some of their models. And that's not something they get all the time. We have the Psyche mission. It's on its way to Psyche 16. We have very few missions that have gone to asteroids. So for them, it's like they're extremely helpful. Almost everybody has been in trying to make this a reality. The only thing that hasn't been great or we haven't been able to get across the line is getting DSN time with NASA. Hopefully we'll fix that in the future. That's been a big struggle for us. Like, talking with this thing is going to be hard. We've had to go to a lot of foreign countries and work with a lot of countries' governments to get time on dishes. And I hope that on our next mission with the new administration, we can figure out how to get across that and be able to use DSN at a reasonable price point, right, as we go into the future. But from the science side, like, it's been nothing but love and nothing but help.
So you're not really using DSN at all. You're using effectively non-US dishes because you couldn't get time on DSN. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. But you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to get a license from the FCC for
Correct.
this mission.
We have a frequency license from the FCC. Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, I can't imagine there's a lot of people that are trying to do what you're doing, walking in and saying, "Here's my application."
There's not. There's so many people that just like. Can we be honest about the world? Like, how many space companies just want to fucking orbit the Earth and take pictures of it? Like, it's so boring. And so we went to the FCC, especially at this time. This was when like Elon was, doing Elon shit. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. There was all this like consternation on the FCC. That organization was amazing to work with. I mean, we told them like, hey, we fucked up our satellite bus from this vendor. We have a very short amount of time. Can you help us? And they're like, yeah, let's go figure out how to do this together. And like,
that's awesome.
Multiple visits here, multiple phone calls. I mean, just a whole bunch of help and support to get us across the line. I have nothing but nice things to say about my interaction with the FCC at every single level, including the personnel. I don't know the political terms, but like the people that were appointed and the people that were not appointed. Everybody was great across the board. So, what am I to say other than like, can't hate on that agency at all. They were exceptional for us.
Is it like a form? Oh, sorry, Tom. But
I was going to say that's good feedback because they just. Well, we'll come back to that, but like they just created this new office or Bureau of Space, right? Was that where maybe you all were the first test case of something novel going through there that they haven't done before?
I don't know what it was fucking called. The government does all this weird shit, and like I just show up to the meetings and tell them what we're doing. We have some great people here that like actually know what all those agencies are and work with them at a higher level, and some people that really, really helped us out at the company. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like there's so many things in government that are changing all the time that I just can't keep track of this shit. I don't even try.
You got people for that too, so that's
even
good.
When we don't, like, who cares? We know what we're doing. We know what we're trying to do, and like a lot of times people will just help you. Like, hey, sorry, we called the wrong person. Where do we go? And like it's really hard to navigate the government. And so I've taken the approach of I don't try.
And you so generally positive, it sounds like, experience with the FCC, positive with the scientific community, potentially a little quibble there with lack of ability to get time on the DSN, the Deep Space Network. Sorry, I needed a sign that says we define acronyms on this podcast, which I think we did, actually. I think we said Deep Space Network. You might have said it, Matt, but like your thought on what should the U.S. government be doing? Should they be doing more? Should they be doing less? I think, there's the jargon in the community is something called mission authorization, effectively saying, actually, we need a supervision or a authorization or an oversight process for exactly the type of things that you would be doing that effectively kind of fall outside of a lot of the licensing frameworks right now. And we've also heard, Tom and I have heard companies that have said, I think Tom might have said this earlier, I can't get my business to work because of international space law. Effectively, like we're operating in this area that there's no governance framework for, which I think most of us would agree is just actually cover for having a crappy business model or a crappy business case. Is the government doing enough? Is it not doing enough?
There's people that go study their whole careers to answer this question and really say, like, how big should government be? What should it be in control of? What should it not be in control of? And I think at either extreme of that spectrum, you have a lot of problems. Government says everything is free and there's no regulation and we don't want to support space at all. You're going to have a lot of problems. Those are called the robber barons. Government is overly regulatory and we can't get anything done. I mean, that's just called communism. So, like, where do you go on that spectrum?
Right.
I don't fucking know. That's the honest truth. Do I think our government does some things really well and some things really bad? Yeah. And I think that's been clear throughout history. And you've seen these times when we've had these inflection points where people have proven that you could do something very different and made a difference. This happened with a little rocket and a little company called Falcon 1 and SpaceX. At that time, it was United Launch Alliance. And I don't think anybody at ULA really thought SpaceX was a real company. And they tried 3 times and they blew that fucking thing up. And they looked like a bunch of idiots in the industry very early on. And then guess what? They changed the fucking world. And I think that's very much how I want to position AstroForge. It's like, if we can pull this off, guys, this shows that, like, hey, JPL, you don't need to be spending $5 billion on missions. You can spend a lot less and get the same results. So where is the reset point? And I think you see the reset point through innovation.
I also like
that's what I hope to achieve.
I like that FCC, though, it sounds like when you went in and you said, this is what I'm trying to do, Federal Communications Commission, that they went in and said, let's try to get to yes. It was, maybe this doesn't fit directly into our process, but let's chat, let's figure out how that works and try to get so that this works. It doesn't sound like anyone went in and said, nah, we don't have a box for that. Get out of here.
Of course. I mean, that was what's great. And yeah, those things take a long time. There's a process there that you have to go through. And a lot of times you can rip out a lot of that process and it would probably be just as efficient. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, whenever you remove process, there is a cost. And I'm not smart enough to be able to weigh the cost on removing that process as we go through. For us, they were great. The FAA removed a lot of that cost of the profit. And then all of a sudden, Boeing was lawn darting fucking airplanes into the ground. So, like, where do you go on the process removal, right? There's got to be a balance there. And I think through society, we try to figure that out. I think we're in the kind of pendulum swing right now. We're removing a lot of process and there will be some cost to that. And I think it's our job as a society to determine if that cost is able to be paid or not, and then it will start to swing the other way. That's how the world works. That's how it's always worked, and I think that's just how humans operate.
Yeah. So looking ahead, all right. So you got Odin, you got your next mission. At some point, then you're gonna be wildly successful. You say we found the right asteroid. We're not telling China where it is. We're gonna go land on it. We're gonna go mine it. And we've got a few examples of. I was thinking about OSIRIS-REx, right? Like, a few examples of space agencies doing touchdowns, grabbing little samples. What's that like next phase of development look like? And I don't want you to put the cart before the horse, but like that's the next big gap is nobody's ever done real extraction, right? Beyond a little surface level grab. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, look, we spent a lot of capital working on our refinery. I mean, that refinery's job is to take an asteroid and turn it into the platinum group metals and get rid of the shit that's not worth anything, mainly iron. And that's where we put a lot of our capital as a company. I mean, I think that's something that we hold very close to the chest. That is really the bread and butter of the company. That's really that I don't want Chinese to figure out, or the Russians or anybody else to figure out, right? That's the bread and butter of what we do. We've been to asteroids before. We've landed on them. We've fucking mined asteroids before. I don't think this always clicks in people's minds because they're scientific missions with small samples. But you got to start somewhere. All that physics is figured out. The only part that we have to improve on is the actual sample retrieval. And we do that through a very specific technique that we hold very close to the chest.
I need an orbit.
Say that again?
Or is that the right word? Refining? You take whatever that raw material is, and then you separate the wheat from the chaff, I guess I would say.
We
then
refine it on the asteroid, though. It's not in orbit.
On the asteroid, okay.
Yeah, you can't. Look, from a physics standpoint, it's not really feasible to come back to orbit. That requires a lot of delta V to slow down to go into Earth's orbit. Like, we smack into the atmosphere and use the atmosphere to shave off kinetic energy. not our thrusters.
The third mission, that would do all that? The Vestry mission, this would test?
No, Vestry is just a lander, and it would take a scientific measurement of the surface to show what the percent grade is. Mission 4 and beyond are the ones we really start to mine the asteroid.
Can you tell us when the Vestry is going to happen, or a sense of?
Vestry is scheduled for, it's on Intuitive Machines Launch 3. So whatever they say.
And then the Stoke comes in post-Vestry, the one that has yet to be named.
Yes.
What's it?
It's all the details I'm giving you guys. That's it. I got yelled at on some podcasts for giving too many details. That's all you.
No, that's good. That was good. No,
this is good. You're teasing it. We'll get you back for that stuff. No, it's really, I mean, this is so interesting. It's so different than I think we've seen any company get this close to doing before. And I'm not going to ask you to, obviously pull the curtain back more than when you did, but how much that technology from refining, like, do you have a lot of people with a mining background, or are you guys all bunch of people from diverse space backgrounds that are figuring this out for the first time?
It's a combination of both. We have some people from mining background, some people from physics background. We have some people from space background. Like, you have to build a very diverse background of company. I mean, here's the deal. I'll tell you guys this. Like, I could hire everybody to build this company out of JPL, and then it would cost $5.5 billion. So, like, you only get the best engineering solutions if you hire from different places. I also don't want everybody from SpaceX. SpaceX build rockets, not satellites, right? Like, you have to have this healthy blend of people that are extremely intelligent, extremely driven, willing to work their fucking ass off to change the world, and from different places.
I just had one other thing. I saw, it was either yesterday or the day before, I think it was on a LinkedIn post that maybe was from AstroForge. It implied that you're thinking about planetary defense effectively, something where you could move an asteroid.
I just told NASA, if they want us to save the planet, I'm willing to do it for them for a lot cheaper. I said it would cost us about $20 million. That's even making some money off it, right? And we already have a rocket launch scheduled for that time frame to go do it. But I'm sure NASA will spend $5 billion to probably not even do it. So that's where we're at, guys. If you guys want to have the planet be saved and not
I want to have the planet be saved. I have two toddlers. I want it for them.
I'm cool to help you out. If you don't, I get it too. We don't have to participate.
Well, I saw something online. They have an astronaut now with a mining background. And so there was a lot of references to where we're getting to, was it the Armageddon movie or Deep Impact? I forget which one, but
it's always fun to bring up Armageddon and pretend we're Bruce Willis and fucking, Ben Affleck and shit. That's a little bit far-fetched. I do think we're much more Don't Look Up, where I'm that crazy scientist guy that wants to try to make money off the asteroid before it hits the planet, and we'll see how that goes. So that's kind of the give and take here. It's like, how much of the asteroid do we mine before it impacts the Earth?
Right.
TBD.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fair. You want to go out and having a good time, right? It's
I at least want to go out being rich, right? Like, that's the plan here. Like, I want to go out in a really comfy house with some awesome cars,
or build that bunker. I don't know, if it's not going to be
or save myself and my family and let everybody else perish.
That's right.
Either way,
or that's going to be your new commodity. You sell out, you build an underground hotel for the,
survive Armageddon.
Buy some call options on underground hotels. Actually, that's a great idea.
Yeah. We like to remind people this show does not offer investment advice, but I feel like that's very sound as an investment. Hey, we won't keep it. We like to do a little bit of a lightning round at the end of the episode. Just a couple quick ones for you.
Yeah, we have a history of doing this, Tom, right?
Yeah, we have a whole episode.
One other time.
Yeah. So I'll throw this one out. What's the biggest? I'm gonna shift it, Clayton, a little bit from last episode. What's the biggest thing in space besides what you're doing that you think folks aren't paying attention to? Like, what's going on that you're like, just kind of like what you're doing is really cool and a lot of people might not be tracking? What else is out there that you think, like, why aren't people paying attention to this more?
We still haven't solved the rationale behind some of the biggest questions to our universe, and we have some new technology like Webb that allows us to do it. And I wish people, for me, that is some of the most exciting shit to answer, like why we're here, where we're going, and also like what new discoveries do we have and we can figure out. And I get it. The average human is like, cool, you guys found a fucking some more evidence of dark matter, dark energy. You found an Einstein ring. Like, nobody gives a shit. But to me, those are like the markers that actually can help explain some of the future. And I wish people cared a lot more. I think it's some of the most interesting stuff in the universe.
Do you read science fiction? Or what do you read?
I don't read. I know as a founder, you're supposed to be like, I read all the time. I don't do that shit at all. Reading is like the slowest form of information that I can put in my brain.
That's true.
So why would I do it? I listen to audiobooks sometimes, and I try to listen to them on faster speeds, and those are very helpful. But like the second I sit down with a book,
that's
Jesus,
fair.
I can't do it.
Okay. So you're not going to be putting out like a lot of these founders, they have their Medium blogs and they're, this is what I did on my vacation.
No, I will write
these 12 books.
I just won't read it. So if you ever actually look at my emails, there's all these misspellings because I literally can't go read it. So if you're listening to this and I emailed you and it fucking sucked, that's why.
AI is going to fix that for you now, right?
It already is. It already is.
All right. So one other lightning round. You got President Trump's ear. You're saying he's like, all right, I'm kind of tired of listening to Elon. Matt, what do I need to be doing in space policy that I'm not doing already?
I'm going to say you should probably go ask Elon. The honest truth here, guys, is like I focus on what I'm good at, and that is trying to build an interplanetary spacecraft to go mine an asteroid. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about U.S. space policy. Like I just can't. I can't. That is not the most important thing for my business to be successful. When it is, and when there is a policy that affects me, I'll deeply care. But I think I want to be open that I'm not somebody that you should be taking advice from. Like, don't take advice from me on how to, I don't know, build cabinetry. Like, that's not what I fucking do. So for me to come in and give advice on space policy, I can't. That's just not something I'm capable of giving.
That is a remarkable degree of humility from a founder from a space company. So a lot of respect for that, because you'd be surprised how many people think I'm really good at this, so I must be really good at advising senior parts of the government too. So respect for that answer. All right, Clayton, you got anything else?
No, for the answer to that first question, I will genuinely say I think AstroForge, to me, you're doing something that is just so rare, and that is you're trying to do something in space that has value outside of a government customer. And I have been called the biggest commercial space advocate because I just frequently point out that most of space is so closely tied to government as a current customer or wanting the government as a customer that anytime I hear space economy, and people have talked about that for probably 20 or 30 years, you set something to the ceiling. It just feels like we're not even close to that where most of the money goes in space. But you're doing something where I feel like it is exactly the opposite of that. So to me, if you could, you're a trailblazer for that. To that notion that there is actually something that can be done in space that has commercial value. So
it's crazy. I started a business. And I really, really worry about the business part.
That is probably
important.
the
It's
right
important for
thing
someone
to
who runs a business. Yeah, to be thinking about the business. So
and this is high praise from Clayton, because just last week he said he would not invest in a SPAC or IPO around helium-3 mining. So
right.
I think that's true validation from Clayton.
Look, I love that. I never want to shoot anybody down for trying. And like we all have crazy fucking ideas and theses, and we're all trying to build shit that you could poke holes in all day long. When it comes to helium-3, great. It goes back to my question of like, it's a massive amount of risk. It's a lot of capital to do, and the current market cap is very small. There's also analogies you can draw. Helium-3's market cap, though, is not zero. And I think there's a lot of companies I get pitched where the current market cap is zero. So I will give all those companies a lot of credit there, and they're making a bet that market is going to grow at a rate that fits their business model. That's not the bet I'm willing to make. I'm not comfortable with that bet. I want to make the bet that if I can figure out the complexities of doing it, the business model is already established and is fucking massive. It's just a different way to think about it.
Yeah, I think to me, the bee in my bonnet is if a company is trying to say there's an actual commercial market for something that the government should just buy on the margins. Effectively, they're getting economies of scale and a better price when no one actually has any illusion to the core customer being the government. So effectively, you're hoodwinking the government into thinking you're going to get, I don't know, it's like you're buying cloud, effectively taking advantage of the scale. And the government's going to get a better price and save money, and the taxpayer is going to save money. But ultimately, no one is sitting in that C-suite, whatever that is for that space company, actually believes that, and they know that their main customer is the government. So I think that's what annoys me the most, and maybe that's why I'm the commercial space advocate. Just because I feel like that is not transparent. I don't feel like that's respectable. So anyway,
you're just a healthy skeptic. And hey, I've got one more question for you. This goes back to years ago. NASA had proposed this asteroid retrieval mission, like going back to Obama era after they canceled
the asteroid redirect, the famous asteroid redirect mission. Yes,
exactly. And I remember as a staffer on the committee that Clayton was on, a professor coming and briefing it. And I don't know anything about this. I go, hey, I'm just curious. If we go grab the asteroid and we bring it back to lunar orbit, do we own it? And they literally pause. They look at each other in the room. These are the NASA people. Goes, that's an excellent question. We're consulting with the State Department on. It never got an answer. So when you go to an asteroid, you start mining it. Like, in the eyes of you guys, do you own it?
This is where Planetary Resources really helped us out. We have the 2015 Space Act that says U.S. companies can go mine fucking asteroids and sell that shit. I'm not obviously in those words, but that's what it says. So, like, here's the reality. I don't give a shit if I own it. I'm the only one that can fucking mine it. So, like, who gives a shit? Like, the prospectors in California didn't own the river. But guess what? They're the only ones there mining that shit. They get to keep the gold. And that's kind of how I look at it. And There's a whole bunch of little intricacies to this plan that I won't discuss because I think they're a big advantage for us to have. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's the important question. The important question everybody has in their mind right now is, can you do it? And once I do it and I become the richest human on the face of the planet to ever exist, then I don't know, maybe I'll just buy my own country and then defend it that way.
Then you can pay for an army of space lawyers.
That's right.
Or just like space warriors, right? Like,
yeah, I guess to defend it. Yeah,
both.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, because ultimately, how is something going to be enforced on an asteroid? Is it going to be by force enforcing that, or is it going to be by mutual agreement with someone like China? Because I don't see another option. I don't see the courtroom as the way that you're going to enforce space law on an asteroid in deep space.
I think it's pen and paper and the sword, and so we'll use both of them.
Matt, thank you for being So we usually end. We always end our podcast with something about this day in space history. So maybe just pivot to that. What I found, Tom, it was not very good, but I mean, 30 years ago, I guess this week it was and it was just a rendezvous. It didn't even dock with it, so I had to read the thing like 3 times. But I guess the first shuttle that rendezvoused with the Mir space station was 63.
That's pretty
February 3rd and 11th,
historic.
1985.
Yeah.
That's the best you've come up with, is that we docked with a Russian space station? And
Actually, Matt, we didn't even dock. We didn't even dock. I just want to point that out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's a quiet week.
Yeah.
I'll just pull this out of my brain. I think this was the inaugural Vega launch, was February 13th.
No way.
I think it was like 2011 or 12.
Okay. Vega. All right. It's not the most well-known launcher, but sure.
No,
yeah.
You had that
also,
right.
I didn't pull.
I'm
just lying. I totally ChatGPT'd that shit right now.
But it did say that? I don't know if I trust that. I don't know how much I trust
2012, ESA launched Vega. So hopefully it's not. I don't even know if that's accurate.
Okay, well, we won't. There's no fact checkers involved in this particular production, so we'll
the people will tell us if we're correct or not.
Matt, thank you for being on our podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it was great. We look forward to following your mission.
We'll watch it. We produce this show ourselves, Tom and I. All our opinions are our own and opinions of our guests, not reflective of a company or the man or clients or anybody like that.